All right, recording is on. I'm going to make you the host and take it away, Jason.
All right, so welcome everybody to the governance working group call number 11. We're going to go through our standard agenda like we do each week here. So getting started, our first item that we usually go over is just kind of a stand up from everybody around. So we want to know, what is everyone working on? Do you have any blockers, and kind of what you anticipate to happen over the next week? And I can start with that one since I'm already up and going here. So right now, I've been doing my standard GitHub stuff in the background. I actually compiled a big list of resources from Discord and from the forum that people have been contributing. So a huge thank you and shout out to everyone who's been throwing in more resources, throwing out more links, and we'll try and get those all organized into the main resources repo. And other than that, just looking at today's agenda, there were quite a few items that I tried to link together. So, if we were talking about the SIPs process, then I tried to link to that in the GitHub and just trying to get these things to be a little more cohesive. I don't have any blockers really at this time. I think everything's moving nicely. And over the next week here, I just want to keep up with that. I want to see that resources list updated. So that's it from my side. Anybody else that would like to do a stand-up?
Yeah, I can jump in here. As a quick stand-up of the last few weeks, actually. I'll start with a few work in progress that have sprung up and I think are relevant here. The working group session specific to the 201 poem social layer platform and project that we've been working on has started about a few weeks ago now, and we've had pretty consistent working group sessions from the traditional council, and it's exciting because it's we've been able to see what started as some fairly abstract ideas that involve blockchain and some things that we're trying to do with the platform in digital fabrication that for a lay traditional council and lay folks helping us and ourselves being lay folk communicating these ideas for the first time in very detailed ways. I'm excited. It's exciting because the consistency, they've been kind enough to offer a whole lot of time, hours and hours on end. So we've had the capacity to cover a lot of ground. And there are recordings of this that I'll be able to share with you folk that I'm sure that they're all fine with sharing. I think at the beginning they were just concerned with getting some of these ideas more concrete so that they feel capable of contributing in consensus dialogue when folks like yourselves and others come into these same sessions to help suss out what can be done inside of this platform as a social layer. And another work in progress outside of that is semi-related to something that Jenny has brought up in the past about an AMA related to more in-depth questions about all of this stuff. And right when I was going to tell the traditional council of this offer and this opportunity for dialogue, they actually communicated to us that they were already in the process of having some discussions as it relates to their 2,000-year plus constitution and the nuances of that in a discussion in a Q&A type of format on a streamed video. So this is something that I figured dovetailed nicely with what Jenny had proposed, and is an opportunity that was actually scheduled for last weekend. So I was excited to be able to, at some point last week, post in the chat for you guys to join if anybody was interested, and to share in the community for anybody interested in the broader community. But it got pushed back, and hopefully it happens this weekend. I'll keep you guys updated as to that. But The work in progress as it relates to that is a blog post. I've been following you guys throughout the weeks, and know that there's some calls to action as relates to these blog posts. And so I have the work in progress as relates to what Lane has done in the GitHub issues, putting forward important challenges in the governance space that are known, and trying to address these with my year's experience with this traditional council, as well as previous years looking into blockchain governance and things like this, and trying to address some of these challenges with this unconventional approach of indigenous matrilineal council process that we've learned thus far. And then having, in addition to that post, that comes from a Q&A where I can kind of put these challenges that Zan has posed, important challenges that he's put forward, and put them into question form for the traditional council, for that to be answered in their words directly. And so the other work in progress that I have is to make an issue specifically for a proposal that I've had here before, as it relates to an additional entity that can offer unique jurisprudence. I have some additional things that I'd like to add to that idea, and put it in a concrete form for anybody to be able to contribute to or add ideas, contributions. And so any blockers that I have to any of these things, I don't see any right now. As it relates to the issue, I think the meeting that we have already started to try to coordinate, myself, Jenny, Juliet, I know is on the document, maybe Lane as well, but also posted it here before for anybody to join. It's a base document to coordinate a meeting with Tomas Diaz of the Fab Academy network, and hopefully it's a connection to Primavera de Filippi. I know Lane has also had some previous work with her, so there may be other means, fireside chat as well as come up. So if there's any way to follow up with this, it's only blocker, because coordination there can start as soon as possible, I think, for a very layered meeting that we may have ahead for us. So yeah, sorry for the long stand up, but I'll stop there. And thank you kindly for all of the meetings and work everybody's been doing for the last few weeks. It's been real exciting to watch. So yeah, thank you kindly.
That is awesome. I just want to say thank you. That sounds like a lot of work in progress. So there's definitely a lot of things going on there. And I made some notes too. So if there's anywhere I can help with the issues or making sure things are linked, definitely let me know on my end as well for that. Did we have any other stand-ups that we want to roll into real quick?
I'll do a quick one. And yeah, just Jason, seconding what you just said, Harold, thank you for sharing all these exciting updates. I think just the opportunity here for learning and collaboration is really enormous, and is really part of what excites me so much about this project. So thank you for serving as a bit of a bridge here between kind of different projects and different approaches and thoughts about governance, and all the work you've been doing as well. Yeah, just really quick update from my side. The main thing I've been working on is continuing to work on the SIP process. I always get confused when I say this, the SIP process improvement proposal, right? So it's like a meta proposal. So like in particular, looking at the all core devs calls that have been happening in Ethereum for the past, well, basically since the beginning, right? This is sort of a call that happens SIP pip, yeah, exactly. So fun side note, in Ethereum, we have the EIP, which is the Ethereum Improvement Proposals, and then we have, so that's EIP, and then we have an EPIP now, Ethereum Improvement Proposals, which is literally meta improvement proposal. This is actually a thing. It's actually like a GitHub repository and stuff, so I just think it's funny. If you're a fan of like recursion and stuff, you'll find this as amusing as I do. Anyway, yeah, so Ethereum does these calls every 2 weeks, which are sort of the cornerstone of governance, or at least of technical governance in Ethereum. And so I had like a chat with Brittany about whether this might be something we might want to do in Stax.gov, and in particular, if this would fall under the aegis of the foundation. And we had talked previously about the foundation stewarding like the SIP process. So yeah, so that's kind of the thing I've been thinking about. I added a chunk to the proposal, the SIP proposal, about this, specifically these meetings. And I know that that document was shared here last week, and I think probably the week before that as well. So take a look if you haven't. There's been some really awesome feedback on that document. Jude, who's one of the core developers who works for PBC, added a ton of like super helpful comments and thoughts and commentary there. So I've been kind of reviewing the stuff he added. And again, like, yeah, this is a great opportunity to dive in and take a look at the SAP proposal if you haven't already, given that there's now beginning to be some like really interesting dialogue here. And I do think it's something that will get actioned very soon under the foundation. I can't speak directly to that because that's sort of in Brittany's wheelhouse. I think that's it for me. Thanks. Oh yeah, no blockers. And I guess, yeah, next step is basically just continue to work on the SIP proposal.
All right, excellent. And yeah, I just want to second that. I started looking in that Google Doc because I had been a little lazy about getting in there. I finally got in there this morning and I saw there were a ton of comments from Jude. And like you were saying, some really interesting conversations kind of happening there too. Like, should we have the main process? Should there be a technical one? And should there be a procedural one? A little bit like these, you know, how many recursive abbreviations can we make kind of thing. But
this is one of those like rare moments in the birth of a project or an ecosystem. I can't say the birth of a project because obviously Blockstack has existed for a while, but like the, you know, flourishing of this ecosystem when like literally this document and this conversation, I think will have an outsized influence on the things that happen for a very long time, you know, to the extent that we all feel that this project will exist for a long time, which I know we all do. So that's just my way of saying, get involved in the conversation if it's interesting, because, you know, like hopefully a few months from now, a lot of this will be in motion.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, if you could drop a link in the chat, and we should probably drop a link in Discord as well, just to give everybody kind of a second fresh look at that.
Speak of the devil. Hey, Brittany. Just mentioned you in the SIP proposal.
Hey, I was just wondering. Awesome. Well, all right. So getting through our stand-ups, I think we've pretty much gotten through everybody. Is there anybody else that wanted to do something real quick, or should we move on to the agenda? I know we're pushing.
You can do a quick one, Jason.
All right, let's go for it.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned this before, and it's come up in the stakeholder interviews, and I don't think it's necessarily something that we can attack now, but I have been doing some thinking, and I've actually talked to Juliet about this around the future of community management, especially the more and more we decentralize. We've looked into the way that other projects do it, because at the moment, you know, we have a few main community managers, but I think there's a real opportunity for us to come up with a code of conduct together as a community, you know, very similar to the work that this group is already doing, and figuring out a way to select community managers, rotate community managers, and enforce our code of conduct in a way that's reflective of the way that we do governance. So it's a big topic, and which is why I haven't really brought it up until today, but I wanted to drop that into the discussion and get everyone else thinking about it, because I do feel like past this governance proposal, this group has like a pretty critical function, and in these kinds of issues, they'll come up regularly. And I've also just been thinking, like, big picture, what is the future of the governance working group? What kinds of decisions will we be making? Which I know has come up in discussions here as well. So no blockers at the moment, but I will share a doc eventually with some notes on what I've been thinking and some resources I've come into on this topic as well.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. And I did have a few items on the agenda too, like the code of conduct is definitely one we've seen in proposals, and I'm excited to get into those topics more. I think we're a little bit of that chicken and egg stage right now, where it's the foundation's forming, but we want to form the policies, but we don't have policies, and we're going to get there for sure. So I'm really excited to see that. Thank you for that, Jenny. And then next up on our agenda, so now we have the community survey, this thing we keep coming back to every week. And I'm actually really excited to see, though, because we had a few different major pushes for exposure. So maybe a quick update to where we're at. And I don't know if we have enough people to get consensus on how to look at it, but I know that's always our next question too. So if you have anything, Lane.
Yeah, so I just checked. We are at 57 total responses, and we had started with, I think, 8 internal to the group, so that's 49, which is pretty good. It's an increase of 5 over last week's call, so we're at a little bit less than 1 a day in terms of responses. So that's the hard data.
All right, excellent. Well, a little better. And I think a long time ago too, we talked about maybe a soft goal of 50 for starting to look at the data and how we can process the data. But I think with the small amount of people we have on today, we'll start looking at that async and just start pulling up the original discussions around what we want to do with it and how, because it's probably close to time, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I suspect that, like, you know, we got 5 in the last week. Like, I don't think responses will be linear, right? I think that, like, interest will wane over time, and so, like, probably they'll fall off unless there's like a new push going forward. So I think that makes sense. But I do also want to celebrate early wins, and the fact that we're at roughly 50 responses is, like, you know, pretty good, all things considered.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Does anybody else have anything they would like to comment on or talk about with the survey before we move on to the next agenda item? All right, so next up, we are looking at the blog post, which is something that we talked about starting and writing some content for. We wanted to get a first one out and then decide if we want to continue doing them and kind of a structure for that. I know I was able to post a little bit. I know Harold's got his work in progress for what he's doing on his side. Is there anything else that we want to talk about related to the blog post, or is there anything that we can help you with on your end of things, Jenny?
How do we feel about imposing a strict deadline of getting your contributions in by this Friday?
I think we might as well. I think we've got a lot of content, right? Like what I was going back through, especially when we're talking about what the group has done, a lot of it's out there already. We have it. So I think it's a matter of compiling it. And I'm happy to assist with that a little bit. And if we want to dive a little bit deeper into the one that I commented on, if we have enough there, then maybe we can expand that and get that done on a faster timeline.
Cool, that sounds good. Thanks, Jason.
I've got some stuff I can contribute as well. Harold looks like he just shared a document. I don't know if that's, Harold, if that's related to the blog post or not, but I did want to just make sure to check with Harold, because I know he's got some work in progress here, if he thinks that Friday is also a reasonable deadline to kind of begin collating all this stuff. I want to make sure everyone has enough time.
Yes, of course. This is reasonable. I've been this has been work in progress for a couple of weeks now. So I was planning to be able to push some stuff out today or tomorrow. So this is fine with me. Yeah. Thank you, Connie.
All right, excellent. So it sounds like we have some basic marching orders to at least get our first milestone achieved there with the blog post. Were there any other comments or things we want to cover with the blog post before we move on? All right. Well, next up, we have our SIPS process proposal that we were, you were talking a little bit about it in the stand-up. Is there anything else we'd like to cover towards that subject, Lane, for this little segment?
Anything else? I don't think so. I think I kind of covered it in my stand-up from my side. Take a look. There's some, Jude helped raise some really interesting questions. I'll try to share more on the status of it next week. Just recapping again, I had mentioned that I added a little bit of a section on like a regular sort of technical governance focused call. And I think I cut Brittany off a second ago, so sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna just mention that call. So yeah, I think that adding that as like a first step or as part of the whole process, because kind of like, okay, we have this proposal, what's like the action item, and that call I think will be the first thing. So even if it is just all PVC engineers to begin with, I think that that's at least we're getting the cadence. And I know that PVC, like the core engineers at Blockstack, I should say, they've been doing calls in the past, and then they had some folks moved to different time zones, and so they haven't kept up with that. But if you look on our GitHub, there is an outdated weekly call schedule. So yeah, I think that this was something that we had in practice, but it's great to just have a foundation be kind of accountable to make sure that that call is happening and make sure it goes forward. So Lane put together some really detailed action items of how that call can be run and how people participate and where to promote it. So I think that that makes it very actionable. So my takeaway from that was to actually work with the Walker and the core engineers and schedule the first call next week. And then, yeah, trying to find that time and then just keep that on a recurring basis. Probably like once every other week, maybe to start. And then if it feels like too often or not often enough, we can adjust it from there.
Brittany, thanks for sharing that. DeWalker's head of engineering, if I remember correctly, right? Just for folks who aren't familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm like talking because, you know, but yeah, DeWalker's our head of engineering. And so he kind of like helps manage. And so he may not always be on the calls, but because it's his team, he's like the easiest access point into that whole other team.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about these. I mean, I just have wanted for a long time to like deep dive personally into the Blockstack tech stack. I think it's a great opportunity to do that. And I guess the other outstanding action item here, I know we had talked about recording action items, would just be like, if this is something that interests you, if this calls is interesting to you, then I don't know where, I guess it'll be shared in, like details will be shared in the governance channel for sure. Maybe there'll be a new channel created or something, but keep your eyes peeled for that. And you know, it'll be open, needless to say. So like, please join if you're interested.
That sounds really exciting. Very cool. So looking over the agenda and kind of my biggest ask related to this comes back to the same thing, just looking at proposals on GitHub. And one of the original questions we asked on the forum is, what should the foundation govern? So we keep coming back to that. I think it'd be a fun time to kind of rehash and look through everything and say, hey, these are the top 5 items I think it should govern, or something like that. And that can all be done through the issues or through comments. And a lot of that's already out there. So that would be my biggest part. Anything else from anybody on the SIP proposal process?
So I agree with you, Jason. I was just going to share, I'm pretty sure that there is an open, yeah, I just found an open issue on exactly this question where I like did a brain dump of my thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link here. So like that might be a good place to have that conversation about. I think I called it scope of governance.
Cool, great.
Yeah, and I had seen some similar questions on the forum too, like going back through the older forum posts and things like that. So I think it'd be fun to rehash that. So thank you, Lane. And I think that about covers everything on the SIP proposal. Let's see if anybody else has any comments. I'll give it a few seconds.
Just reading on the agenda here, I wasn't sure if you were going to talk about these separately or not, but I do see Community Research Observer and Code of Conduct. Anything to add on those, or are we like kind of no updates in the past week?
You know, I left those on from last week because they're kind of open topics. And this came back to our action items discussion of like, how do we take this from open topic to closed topic and something was done about it. So there's not a lot I have to add. The Community Research Observer role, last week we talked about how there hasn't been much research going on in this particular phase of the process. So when that starts happening again, we know we can implement it, and we just need an official way to do so, which is kind of waiting on what we're doing with the SIP documentation as well. So I think it's good to keep it as kind of a rolling topic. For the Code of Conduct, it was originally talked about how Blockstack put together one. I think it was based on the contributor covenant that applied to the repo. And then we wanted to look at how structurally the foundation would be involved with saying, hey, this is the code of conduct and we're determining things. So I really don't think there's a way we can answer those right now. But I didn't want them to get lost. So I definitely still had them on the list, and I think we'll just keep rolling them through till we have answers.
I think that's a reasonable strategy. Like there's something to be said for keeping things on the agenda until we're ready to like handle them, just so they don't get lost, because there are a lot of open issues and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth just mentioning them in the calls like this, just so there's a record of, you know, that we've like yes, we're on top of this. It's still on our list.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I agree with you there. And next up here, I think we're going to have our Stax Foundation update from Brittany. Brittany, are you ready to tell us a little more about what's going on?
Sure, yeah. So the foundation is, it's a new entity now. I think we've gone over that. And so obviously with a company, you need people, you need funding, you need a website, or you don't need these things, but these are the things that are working on behind the scenes. So the transfer of assets from PBC to the foundation will be the initial way that it's funded. And so we had a board meeting at the PBC side last week, and in that board meeting discussed kind of what the scope and size of that asset allocation would be. You know, we stated a long time ago that it will include things like the you know, app mining tokens that were set aside. Those will go underneath the foundation. There also will be a portion of the treasury that's like the long-term and short-term treasury. So these tokens will then be used for ecosystem development over time. So the size and scope of those has been like roughly sketched out, but it just needs to be finalized. And then for tax purposes, obviously it has to be recognized in a certain way. So our financial team is working on that. But those are happening behind the scenes right now. So within, fingers crossed, the next week, we will have an update on that actual entity being formed and having everything underneath it. So we are hopeful we can make sort of a little bit of a press splash as well by just explaining what we're doing, why this is so important to the mission of Blockstack, and introduce it to the world in a way that like it gets visibility. So we're anticipating, you know, maybe next Wednesday that could be the date of that announcement. With that, we're also talking to potential board members. In order for the organization to like exist, we need to have board members signed on, like at least 2. So there will be 3 people. But then beyond that, I think one of the things of you know, we've talked about here and we've been thinking about is the call for like, you know, recommended board members who represent the different values that we hope are encompassed on the board of the foundation. You know, I think that, you know, having people who have experience in the open source world, having people who understand sort of the nuances of, you know, diverse ecosystems is really important. So those sort of seats, I think maybe as part of that announcement, we could actually do a call for like the seats of saying like, we're looking for people who fit this criteria. This will be, you know, we want community input and feedback on that. I don't know, I would love thoughts here, but like it may be too ambitious to have like a formal vote and election process, but maybe if, you know, people are able to be suggested and then considered based on their merits and then kind of accepted into the board with community feedback, that may be the first low sort of like low process, but maybe first kind of foray into like an unstructured governance around board seats. So that's what's very top of mind going into this next week for me.
Brittany, do you have thank you for sharing that. Just curious, do you have a target size for the board?
I think odd numbers. I don't know, sound good, but I think in the beginning, the original MVP is like a 3-person board because we'll have to have that just to get started. You know, I think if we're like, okay, let's say a 5-person board, then that would add 2 seats that we could sort of use as kind of informal process. With the governance, I think it's pretty standard, actually, in a lot of bylaws that I've read, of having the foundation require everyone to get fired after 1 year of service, and then they can be voted back onto the board. But that way, there's a forcing function that if people aren't adding value, then you know, you can kind of get them off very quickly and then sort of rethink like how you're structuring it. So with that would give people a 12-month window. Obviously, if they were terrible, we would kick them off beforehand, but we could expand the board beyond. Like I think Zcash has a larger board. I also think that, you know, what I've learned just recently from the Linux Foundation is like they have a technical committee, which is separate from their governing board. of the organization. And that technical committee, I think, is another great place to have a number of people who come together and kind of help determine what the future of the product is, separate from the people who are thinking about, you know, hiring and firing and salaries and like all that type of stuff. So potentially using that as like another avenue to add some really great technical folks who maybe their role is very different.
I just wanted to say I really like the idea of firing everyone after a year. I think defaults are really important, and I think if the default, like you have to like earn your position, I think that's great.
Yeah, in the Singapore like default for their foundations, that's where I learned about it, and they actually have it as a lottery that like every year someone has to get fired, and it's like just totally by chance. So basically, you want to do a good job, so like you're not, you know, sitting cushy. You could be the person that got fired. You can always get asked to rejoin, but if you aren't sort of upholding your work, then you're gone.
That's excellent. I love that as well. I've always said that term limits are something that could really save us from a lot of things that happen in government. So I am all about that, and I think that's a fun way to go about things. One question I had for you when it comes to the website, you know, I'm curious, we talked a little about domain names. I'm curious about design, open sourcing the code. How can we get involved?
Yeah. So the process is like community built versus quick and fast with community feedback afterwards. And I think I've taken the quick and fast. So we will be using stax.org. Which is a domain name a team member picked up a long time ago. So all of that will be, you know, probably in the next 30 to 60 days. It's all managed under a PBC thing just for security and structure, but that will get moved over to the foundation as well. And the logo and everything is very basic. So I had a team member just basically take the Blockstack logo and turn it black. And so that's the MVP logo for now, but I think it definitely could be open to feedback and new improvements on it. Also, the Twitter handle will be Stax.org, so at Stax.org as part of it. So these things are just starting to like spin up. I don't think the website is viewable right now. I think it's only in the edit mode. We were maybe gonna publish it live with an announcement, but I can probably drop in just like the draft URL.
So
it's like
I just checked.
Or something, but it's very basic. Yeah.
I don't know if this I don't know if this is intentional or not, but there's a website up now at stax.org. Yeah.
Oh no, for me it redirects.
It redirects to staxtoken.com, exactly. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I see the word foundation here. Stax 2.0, the foundation.
Yeah, sorry,
it's lowercase f, not uppercase F foundation. I got it.
Hey, I'm excited too. Yeah. And Brittany, depending on if they want to share, you know, like a draft version or even just a screenshot, would be super fun to kind of see where things are going with the group and anything else. And I'm sure there's some of us out there, we love to provide feedback. So
yeah, definitely.
To see it all coming together.
Cool. Yeah, I can probably, maybe the easiest would be just a few screenshots and then I can share it in a doc that people can comment on because it's very simple. So, you know, just imagine a white background with black text and pretty much it. But yeah, it leaves a lot of improvement for other people to weigh in and contribute in different ways. It's a blank canvas in a lot of ways, let's say that. Yeah, actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe I could share it, but I have to like log in. There's some passwords and stuff, so it might be a little tedious in this time frame.
All right. Well, I think that just about covers everything from your update. Is that right?
Yep, that's it for my end.
Okay, perfect. So we'll kind of roll into some of our remaining topics here. So I know we're passing 7:40, but if everyone wants to hang out for a little bit, there were a few items that I wanted to bring up again, much like we were talking about the research observer and the code of conduct. So one of the topics that Kieran brought up, which I know he's not here today, But we talked about languages and translation. First, kind of starting on the topic of the survey and how we can make sure that we can capture and get as many languages as possible, so that's not a main blocker for people. And we also wanted to talk about how overall we can make sure we do some really good translation efforts for what we're doing as the foundation. And one small update I can include, we're actually working with another group to try and translate Blockstack Connect right now. So I got my fingers crossed that we do everything right and it gets approved, but we're doing that as a community effort. And in the same way that we're doing that, I'm hoping we can use that methodology to help translate some of what we're doing here as well. So I do see some progress that we can make on that subject, but I'm curious if anybody just had any comments or any other input on languages and translation.
Just a quick thought. I think translations are a really excellent candidate for bounties. Like they're small tasks, they're well-defined, they're fairly objective. Yes, you need someone to review a translation and make sure it's not just, you know, Google Translate output or something. But like I've seen this work well in other communities, and when there is a foundation and that foundation has resources at its disposal to do things like grants and bounties, I think this could be a good starting point. And it rallies the community, right? It gives people all around the world like something to get excited about.
Actually, Lane, I was just going to say we put out bounties for translations for documentation around testnet, and I just shared those around again yesterday, and we've gotten a couple of responses, and it's made pretty clear there that no simple Google Translate pieces will fly, that we can check those, so please don't do that. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be interesting to see, because it's you know, it's technical documentation, so however people interpret that, but I can report on the success of that here too, if in case that's something that we want to do moving forward for the foundation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. What we've been doing with the other group is we found a React package that we're working with, and we're trying to put everything into JSON files coming out of a spreadsheet automatically. So we're trying to figure out a process, and that's more like watching your process, Jenny, watching this process with this group, and seeing how we can integrate that all together. I think we're going to come up with a really fun way to make sure everything's internationalized. So I'm excited about that. Any other comments on the topic of languages and translations?
Yeah, sorry, something just came to mind. We had talked about, I think it was last week, about the survey being in multiple languages, and I think I may have dropped the ball on this. I think I was supposed to edit the survey and make it clear that you can respond in any language. I will add that text now. If there's anything else that should be done with the survey. I know we're talking about winding it down, but if there's anything else, let me know.
All right, yeah, I think that would be excellent. Just if we had that small note at the beginning that says, hey, reply in the language you feel comfortable with, that would definitely be our quickest action item first. So appreciate that. Thank you for that. And with that, I think that pretty much covers the topic. It'll probably end up being a rolling one like some of these others, but I'm excited because in that sense, we really get to dig into what the question is and how we want to answer it. So we'll keep going from that one. Another topic I had on the agenda was shared resources. And this comes from a GitHub issue we opened a little ways back. And the idea here is, as the foundation's formed, as we're getting things together, we're going to want to share things. We're going to want to share a Zoom account, a YouTube account, probably other accounts related directly to Stax.gov. And my biggest ask from this one was actually from the Blockstack community, and I need to express this in the chat as well. What would be the best way to share a Blockstack ID for a corporation? And I'm interested in this topic because I see it as, you know, we think of everything as individual users, but I do see some use cases where this would be possible. And I'm curious what's been done in other ecosystems or what people would recommend here, but it's not something we have to get too deep into today, just something I wanted to bring some awareness to. Well, I think, and to Matt's question, can you create a multi-sig wallet? Well, anybody can. We don't have one at this point, so it would be really interesting to see. And those are the kind of things that I want to start probing questions for. You know, what do we need as the foundation? You know, if we're going to talk about a multi-sig wallet, if we're going to talk about voting, these might be longer term project type items, but they are things that once we identify, then we can start putting some power behind the build as well.
action item. Make that list.
Oh yeah, list of lists. All right, does anybody else have any thoughts on the shared accounts, or should we move on to the next item?
It's a good question, but I don't think I have any direct answers yet. Thanks.
We'll need a shared Zoom account. That might be a easy first thing to try. Or not, or we use Jitsi or something. We talked about that too. Separate topic, sorry.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things. But either way, I think whether it was a shared Zoom account and then we use an issue to move into Jitsi, or we move over or whatever, I think all these are great discussion items to keep bringing up. So we've got that one on our list, and I think we're ready to move on from there. The final one that I had on the list, I kind of threw on last minute. It was from the proposals repository, issue number 9, about the founding documents. And now that we're getting to this early stage of the foundation, I think it's great to look at this again, where we're talking about things like mission statement, vision statement, values, code of conduct, constitution, all our basics for getting things started. So there's been a lot of great information, a little bit of comments going back and forth there. And I'd just love to see everybody start providing input, because I think we're getting close to that stage where over the next week or two here, it would be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the timing on that is great, because you know, with any entity, so more in like the legal structural side, the bylaws are an important part, and those bylaws can be amended, they can be added to with board approval. So there is a governance to those things, but I think establishing them in a very with a lot of transparency in the beginning is really key. And those are not completed, they're not published. Those I think will go into effect with the first board meeting or something. Like there can be some rough governance around them, but that actually gives us some time. But as you said, like we're getting to that point where I think having the code of conduct, if we can get that done as a group, that's great. If we can weigh in on mission and values and some of those statements, like those are great too. So yeah, happy to like break into smaller groups and work on some of that if people want to do that too. It may be a faster way to iterate.
Excellent, and I agree. Thank you for that, and I look forward to seeing some of that form. I like long form documents, and I like reading things. So when it comes to those type of things, I get excited. So on that note, any other comments just around the founding documents, or any other agenda items that people would like to address today before we close out the call?
We have a text message from Matt here. Yeah. Jason, I want to make sure you saw it.
Oh, thank you, Matt. So you have, he shared a link there that we can include in the docs. I did start a new issue just around a bunch of resources, but I don't think I've seen that one yet. So I'll make sure it gets added there as well. Starting to reorganize some of the resources, like I said in the beginning. And oh, and I did want to give one really big shout out to Juliet as well. I know she wasn't here today on the call, but the 2 forum posts that she did, I think were excellent. We had one that was based around the survey and taking the survey, and the other one was a working group update, which is something that we've been trying to formalize as part of this process. And I actually liked seeing it on the forum. So I'm going to propose an issue where we can still do the updates in GitHub, but maybe those should be published. And that would give us another way to say, hey, here's what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great way to make sure that they get, in front of the whole community. Super quick thought on the founding documents thing. I know this has come up a few times. I know Brittany has mentioned this a few times. So the Zcash Foundation has made all of their founding paperwork and documents and everything open source. It's all on their website. It's a really fantastic resource. It's definitely something we should avail ourselves of as we're figuring out our own founding documents. We can, we can include a link to that.
Perfect, thank you for that. And do we have anything else that we'd like to cover today on the call?
If you do want to see a preview of the website, I can share it via screen share if folks can view their screen. If okay.
Sure. Did you want to share that here? Or
Sure,
afterwards?
I could
Hey,
share it
whatever.
here real quick if we're done, if you want to see. Okay, so this is the
The beginning.
draft. Can you see this?
Yep. Yeah, I see it there. Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's as you can see, the the logo looks very familiar. And this kind of sentence here, I think like there's I can screen share it so that people can give feedback, but basically there will be these different things. Some of these need, some of the text is still being edited, but basically connecting into these working groups, the calls that we have, things that are coming soon that aren't here yet. News is basically the connection to the blog, and then the joining the community and building. These connect to some existing resources in Blockstack. So fairly simple, like I said, but kind of the infrastructure that we need of just having a place where people can like subscribe. We can capture content that way or direct them to things like Discord or Telegram as well.
That is so exciting. Thank you for sharing that. It's so cool to see like a home for all this stuff that we've been working on.
Yeah, and I know a lot of it's on GitHub, so a lot of these links actually were like, we had a whole list of links, but they all went to the same GitHub, so we cut it down, but still you can see there needs to be a little more editing here.
Still, I think it's really exciting to see a preview. So very cool, and thank you for sharing that. And I think that pretty much ends everything here on the call today. So our next meeting is going to be next week on May 13th, same time. And we'll have a new agenda item posted up, as well as the recording and notes for this one later today. With that, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for running the meeting too.
Thanks, Jason. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you kindly, everybody.
Bye.